Okay, so this is the third video in this series, and basically, what we want to do now is we want to go and try and stock the property to a specific capacity that can obviously, through time, be monitored. So, obviously, there's already maybe going to be animals on the property, therefore, you would need quite recent information on a total census or sampled census of game numbers. And you've obviously by this time calculated the grazing capacity as well as the browsing capacity. And you've extrapolated that data to the larger farm area or surface area. So now you know that in accordance to ecological and maybe even economical capacities, where do we need to go and stock? And if we stock in accordance to this process, obviously we have something to go and monitor trends in accordance to. So please do remember that the ecological carrying capacity is basically the one that you determined through the use of the assessment techniques of both graze and browse, and the economic carrying capacity is obviously the one that you now go and make adjustments to this total ecological carrying capacity in accordance to the specific objectives of the farming enterprise. So if you are, for instance, in the game of conserving nature, biodiversity, and maybe even for the sake of tourism purposes on the property, you would go and stock to about anything between 70 and 100% of the ecological carrying capacity. Um, and then obviously we know that if we want to, let's say, breed with game and we want the highest form of production in free roaming game as an example, we would just go and stock at a 40 or 50 or 60%. So why 50? Because usually this is a place where we've got the highest form of production potential within a population. In any case, so this is what we then call economic carrying capacity, and that's an adjustment made in relevance to the objectives of actual stocking. The other thing is obviously to take in mind with the specific objectives the diversity of species to be stocked, and that's game species obviously. So the composition of game stocked. How many species are we going to stock? And like I said, I mean, if it's for the sake of tourism, we know that we want to go and stock the maximum amount of species because this is most probably going to be beneficial with regards to the objective of tourism, where a lot of tourists would like to see a variety of game animals, not just one or two, but for the sake of still keeping to biodiversity, you would obviously want to go and stock animals that's not extra limital to the area that should occur there naturally and maybe historically, even to ensure that you've got a decent natural situation on your hands. And for tourism's sake, this might be a specific objective as well, where yes, some tourists would like to go and view the most amount of species, where others would rather see value within the concept of seeing nature in its natural state, as an example now. So within fynbos vegetation, you might find that you can go and stock like any extralimital species or species that historically did not occur here in the form maybe of you've got gemsbok, buffalo, eland, and something like impala and springbok, etc., that is stocked onto the properties just to ensure that they've got additional species that can be ticked off of the tourist list. But in any case, I mean, that's enough babbling. Let's go on to the actual process of stocking. But these are obviously things that you need to think of is when you compose a list of what to stock, what's the amount of each species that we currently have. And that's obviously manageable species, herbivores, in the form of game that you can take off and obviously stock onto the property as well. So introduce or reintroduce or sell off. And then obviously in accordance to the social structures, and that is social pressures. So what's the maximum amount of each species that you can stock on the given property size, as well as things like diet preference and the acceptability of the habitat and environment and vegetation for the species to be stocked. Would they actually succeed in that area or not? Well, in any case, that's just an example of things we think of when stocking. But I mean, here you've got just an example yet again on the screen. But in any case, so if you want to go and just pause on this and see, well, where is this? This refers to form C's and D's, etc. But in any case, I'm going to skip to the Excel spreadsheet and then we can maybe look at the calculations from that. And what variables and inputs do we need to go and do these types of calculations of stocking structures? Some tables to check out if you just want to take note of that. Here's a lot of stuff out of Botman de Toy. This is on animal diet preferences. This one is on the game distribution. This one is on a stocking table. So all of that information with regards to large animal units and grazer units, etc. is on page 840 in Botman de Toy's textbook. And then GU and BU equivalents as to work out stocking in 842. So those two would obviously be beneficial in actually determining the specific values of when you go and determine stocking in accordance to carrying capacities. We use this form at the college just to keep track of the species to be stocked. And obviously we make use of one of these stocking tables. For those at the college, you can find this on CA Connect, the specific form. If you do not have it, just pop me an email. Like I said earlier, this is my work email, lou@seatbedryfs.co.za, and ask for that specific form. But like I said, or this table with information on all of this. You'll find it in the Game Ranch book as well, Botman and Toy's Game Ranch book. And if you cannot, obviously just pop me an email and I'll send you the version that I do have. Mind you that some of these values change as you seek different sources. We'll seek this table from different sources. I've noted this is just a shortened version. It's not all of the species, obviously. This is just to give you an indication or example of how this form looks like, and especially the headings on top of each of these columns. Alright, let's go to the stocking table. So you'll see on this Excel spreadsheet that you can ask for as well per email. I will send you this. You'll see that I gave you a lot of information on, well, what is stocking and how do we go about using this specific calculator maybe to assist us in stocking. The unfortunate thing is this form or the spreadsheet on Excel still needs a lot of input. I did not go and give all of the species. That would be nice if I could have done that, but I mean, it's going to take me a day or two to just basically log in all of the species and then have you go and select all of those. There is some versions at the college of this running around, I was not the author of that spreadsheet, so if you do find one of those, make use of it. Why not? This is just an example that you can basically go and use. So in any case, I'll show you where you can enter additional information to this table. I just work with 3 species stocking it to a specific stocking scenario example, obviously. So stocking should be done in accordance to, and hopefully you can read this. Let me just try and zoom in a bit more and see whether we can see it. Almost. Stocking should be done in accordance to the economic capacity of the farm, not the ecological carrying capacity. This means that, for example, if your objective, and obviously we mentioned all of this, so if your objective is tourism's sake, go and stock at 70 to 100, depending on specific objectives, and the state or the successional state of the veld as an example now, if you want to bring that into play, or the type of reclamation projects running on the farm. In any case, remember that a large animal unit to be stocked is 450 kilograms, and that's a cow of 450 kilograms, an animal unit or a large animal unit. Usually we don't go and stock in accordance to this for ecological sakes, especially within the wildlife management industry. Rather, we go and stock game in accordance to the GU and BU. So the grazer unit is a blue wildebeest of 180. That's a mean, usually not a cow. It's just a mean of blue wildebeest, mean weight, obviously. And the kudu is a browser unit of 140 mean weight. Okay, so what do we have? We go and find the specific form or this table that gives us this detail in Botma and the Toy, or like I said, the version that I can maybe send you, or the one that's on CA Connect for the Newbridge or Centurion Academy students. Then we go, and this is a preset list. It's not my stocking list. This is my stocking table. This is just to show me the figures. So what I would recommend is you going and just insert additional rows and columns and cells to this table, and then fill in the species that is on the property already, that's the game species, or that you want to stock, or maybe potentially want to stock in the future as an example, and fill in that. So then you've got a list specific to your farm. I mean, outside of the scope of that, you're not quickly going to go and operate. But in any case, so all of the information that's given in that table is now just portrayed within this table. So what do we have? We've got the type of animal, we've got the mean mass in kilograms, the GU per animal, the animals per GU, percentage grazing of diet, the BU per animal, animals per BU, the percentage browsing of diet, and then the maximum stocking in accordance to social limitations, and that is per 100 hectares. This is the maximum animals that can be stocked per 100 hectares. Obviously after this you've got stuff like competition that enters the game, and restrictions to production as an example. Okay, so this is a hypothetical example. Like I said, in this case we've got the input area over here where we can input data, but you've done that already here as well. But this is now specific to go and stock. So the size of the farm in hectares, you put in the size of the farm. If you don't want to do it in accordance to the size of the farm, obviously you can always do it in accordance to the management unit size or the vegetation unit size. One in the same thing. Then you've got the total GUs for the farm and the total BUs for the farm. So when we go to the side of this table, of this Excel spreadsheets, then we go and see at something like our Dankwoods, we got a hectares per large animal unit. And then we've got hectares per grazer unit and grazer unit per hectares, both of these scenarios that I gave you for you to go and make adjustments in. But in any case, you go and basically work with grazer units per hectare. So to get to the amount of animals that can be stocked, let's say on our hypothetical 250 hectares, you just take that and obviously multiply it by 250, and then you extrapolate the data in this case. Over the year, I multiplied it by 400 as an example, so you can even go and play around with that specific calculator. Just make sure that you change the variables in that sum. So you just multiply that one, GUs per hectare, with the size of the farm, and then you obviously write that into this area, which is the total GUs for the farm. The same for the BUs for the farm. So you've got the BUs for the specific area, that is for the size of that area. Make sure that you have relevance to the multiplication thereof or the extrapolation thereof. In this case it was BUs per hectare 0.016, which in this instance was very small. If you multiply that by 250, you basically get 3.914 BUs that can be stocked, which is obviously quite low. But this is now for an area that has a reduced prevalence of the browsing strata. In any case, let's go to the stocking table yet again. So that you just pop in there, you've now extrapolated the BUs per hectare and GUs per hectare to the total size of the property, or the section of the property, or the camp to be stocked, in other words. So that information you put in there. Let's quickly check if it should calculate things now. Not really. I'll check now where I put in the specific formatting for the calculations. But in any case, so now we've got a stocking table. We decide maybe out of this list of probable species, or our wish list to stock, we go and choose in accordance to diet preferences. Let's say we have taken that into account, diet preferences, in composing this list. Now we have to go and chop and change it to ensure that we basically cover the stocking of the whole feeding spectrum. And this is now with regards to bulk roughage grazers. I mean, if you go and look at a buffalo, it's a bulk roughage grazer. If you go and look at a blesbok as an example, it's a non-selective grazer as an example. Now, with a wildebeest might be a highly selective grazer. So we want a whole spectrum covered of the types of animals utilizing the forage, not just one-sided. So we're not just going to stock, let's say, waterbuck and buffalo and zebra and white rhino on the property, because we know it's going to be the one-sided utilization of the vegetation component, and we want the whole spectrum to be utilized equally and in harmony. This is for the sake of reduction in biodiversity, in other words, and deterioration of components within the veld that essentially would lead out, or eventually rather lead out into transforming the habitat and vegetation to such an extent that those species that you actually stock is most probably going to be influenced negatively, and they are most probably going to start to decline in numbers and abundance, in other words, and maybe even become locally extinct of your property in the future. And this is due to the one-sided, but obviously this becomes quite technical. This is something that you're obviously going to monitor as well throughout time. It doesn't necessarily just happen within a single grain season, but you can pick up influences depending now obviously on some additional environmental limitations and influences. In any case, so what we did in this specific form is we said, well, we want, and this is hypothetical, yet again, it's not perfect in accordance to covering the whole spectrum. Please do remember the type of game species to be stocked as well. So type 1, 2, 3 and 4 These are obviously the species and how their influence on the habitat influences other species of game. So if you stock more of type 1, then obviously we know that type 2 species might be benefited or disadvantaged. If we stock more of type 4 species, then obviously the other species aren't going to be influenced or rather benefited, because you are now removing more, we are placing more pressure on the browsing component and reducing pressure on the grazing component as an example. So species 1, 2 and 3 might benefit from this type of structure stock. This information you obviously can obtain from various sources as well. So we stocked buffalo, blue wildebeest and blesbok on this property, and we used a 25 hectare property with the total GUs being 25 and the total BUs being 15. So we then went to this specific table and said, well, in accordance to our social limitations per 100 hectare, how many animals can we actually then go and stock? So we worked out the maximum stocking related to farm. So you'll see that there is a specific sum that we did. Essentially is you want that figure to be relative to that figure, the hectares in size. So what we did is we basically took the 17, that one, divided by 100, because we are working maximum stocking per 100 hectares, so we need to reduce that into terms or units of 100. In other words, that basically gives us what, 2.5 times that. Then we get this. This has obviously been worked to have zilch decimal places. That is why we don't have a 12.5, but rather it rounded it off to a 13. And we did it now the same for all of these as well. So that's how we calculate the maximum stocking related to the farm. So on this whole property, the maximum amount of buffalo that can be stocked is 13. Blue wildebeest 18. Blesbok 25. And yet again, is this precise? No. But it gives us a figure to go and try and monitor trends, especially if we go and look at, let's say, production potential and production trends, and regulation of populations, either natural or rather natural on the farm as well, when doing monitoring obviously. So now we've got a GU for one and a BU for one column. So this is the specific calculation. The following calculations to determine the GU for one and the BU for one. The GU for one equals the GU per animal times the percentage grass diet as a proportion. The percentage grass and diet as a proportion. So don't work it to a percentage. So it's not out of 100, but it should be out of 1. So just convert percentages into proportion. The GU per animal and the percentage grass and diet. So the GU per animal is that one in this case, and the percentage graze and diet is that. So the proportion would be 0.78. So in this case, this is the result that you get from that. So the GU for one is that, and you do it for the BU per one as well. BU per animal times the percentage browse and diet as a proportion. So if we go on this table, there's the BU per animal and percentage browse of the diet. So you do that specific calculation on those and you get a figure. So the number to stock is something that you go and play with now, and this is obviously throttled by the maximum number to stock. So in this case, I said I want to go and have a zero difference between the stocking of the GUs, if that makes sense. There's a difference within the browsers, what browsing units. What this basically means is that we can have more browsers stocked. So we either need to bring in a pure browsing species or play around to have the certain facet of graze that some grazers have to be increased, if you know what I mean. So this one is now interchangeable. So if I go and put in 10, it's going to change that. So total for this table is the amount of animals that you actually go and stock, the values thereof, which is these two. For GU for this one, which is a GU group total, it just takes that figure and multiplies it by that one. Then you get this figure. So now it shows if I stocked 10 buffalo, I am overstocked with regards to the grazing component. If I stock at 2 animals, it says that if I obviously now correlate it to this number, which is the total for the farm, it's obviously got from this specific table that you put in as a variable. And we can see that I'm understocked within the grazing component. If I stock 6, oh nice, so that balances. But this is now a problem. So how do I then go and play around with these species to increase that? Is it even possible, or are we just going to say, well listen, these are the species stocked as an example, but something like a Great Duikertjie might have a big influence, and that would be additional to the browsing component within the farm. So let's take account of that as well. In any case, you have to take account of these species, not only the ones that you want to stock, but the species that are obviously, let's say inherently almost on the property, so naturally occurring on the property. There's always going to be a klipspringertjie or a duikertjie or a steenbokkie or one of these small animals that you can take account of for their utilization effect as well. Okay, let's see if there's anything specifically that I missed out of this. Hopefully I covered everything with regards to stocking. No, that basically looks like it. Okay, just to pop up some of the references that was used. If you want to have a look at these and go and find them, you can find that a lot of information on these methodologies and the specific steps within the techniques may be used, or limitations or directions used within the methodology can be found within these references. So, yeah, if there's any additional queries or something that I did not disclose or missed within these videos, please feel free to send me an email asking me questions. If I do get at it, obviously I'll try and answer you as in-depth as possible. Alright, thank you, bye.